Chapter 14. Magaluf. Magaluf, or Shagaluf, has been described as an oasis by a few, but a poor man's Ibiza by many others. The Black Pool of Spain. One business associate I have has a son who insists on going to what my associate calls the armpit of the Mediterranean, a place vacationed by pissed-up Brits in football shirts and vest tops. Some laughable reports will tell of a time when Magaluf, or Shagaluf, was once a jewel of the Mediterranean, but there's no denying it is commonly seen as a cesspool of brightly coloured straw hats with "Kiss Me Quick" across them and t-shirts that read, "There's a party in my pants." Another pal shared his own experience when he observed a pair of teenage kids treated to seeing their dad and his new girlfriend shamelessly embarrass themselves in the resort's clubhouse when giving their best drunken rendition of "Right Said Freds, I'm too sexy for my shirt" on stage. And on the same trip meeting a character at a local bar called Big Dave from the northeast of England and got to hear his endless tale of cracking it after he'd sold his fleet of kebab vans and share of his girlfriend's nail salon. But one of the funniest experiences I'd heard about is when a honeymoon couple booked an all-inclusive holiday that promised them sipping champagne from crystal-cut glasses, but instead they found themselves guzzling a warm, piss-tasting substance from a shared plastic cup. And as many will attest, Magaluf and some of the surrounding Brit hotspots have gained a bit of an unsavoury reputation who, as a result of some of my fellow countrymen's efforts, their own omission and behaviour, have catapulted the perception of a civilised Britain and her populace back 100 years in terms of our advancements in manners and our ability in being able to control ourselves whilst drinking unscrupulous amounts of local wine and beer. But for me, it doesn't matter where I lay my head, hang my hat, or what side of the road I'm driving on. I've found there's always a chance of a bit of business and a few quid to be earned, if you have an eye and nose for it, plus the ability to work, get along with and be around most people that you meet on any given day. It was whilst I was in Ibiza that I got chatting with some lads who said they had a bit of business in Magaluf, opening a new bar and something else to do with a ticket agency. Their pitch and sale was an exclusive opportunity and there's money in this, which at first I thought, if a deal is too good to be true, it usually is. But the offer was on the table, or bar, and a little part of me thought, nothing ventured, nothing gained. One thing I use as a measure of people when they're discussing business is to not only observe how and where they discuss things, but also how they conduct themselves when there's alcohol involved. Because not in a million years would I sit and discuss any type of serious business with complete strangers, who were as open and comfortable about discussing plans with me, who they've just met, that involved financial transactions, contracts and agreements, because if they are that open in that setting, what and how easy would they be to corrupt or talk to someone else who could then apply a little bit of pressure and encouragement to see what the score is? It's not being paranoid, it's simply not having your pants pulled down because of someone else's carelessness. And the fact remained, my gut feeling was, and proved to be, this would turn out to be nothing more than a complimentary piss-up. But in fairness, they seemed like, and in the end proved to be, decent people who carried themselves well on both occasions that I'd ran into them in Ibiza. So, when they invited me out to Magaluf any time I liked through the summer, offering to put us up in a $750,000 penthouse apartment, I took Kian's number and said I'd be in touch. I remember thinking, why did this feel like this was one of those once-in-a-lifetime deals, but you've got to sign up now as there's only a limited number of seats? Anyway, we enjoyed the rest of our time in Ibiza, but much like each and every time I'm at the will and command of my island mistress, otherwise known as the White Isle, I'm somewhat able, albeit reluctantly, to break from her warm and welcoming grasp and board a plane back home. Once I was back on the Spanish mainland and away from the calming madness of Ibiza, I took stock of my mighty island and what was going on around me. All was quiet on the Western Front, the TV had little to offer, and we still needed to unpack. So, within what must have been a record amount of time and a few minutes of thought, I decided, fuck it, why not? Things are on the go slow here, and I have a business angle of my own in mind. So, after I got off the phone to Kian and shouted, "Pack the cases again, Jem. We're off to Magaluf next week," I called the chaps and told them to hold the fort a little longer. Many of my mates think I'm borderline insane going off like that to meet up with people that I don't really know, but you only live once. Plus, I get a good take on people, and for every time I've taken a bit of a chance and been okay, I've swerved 10 similar situations because my senses warned me off, so this can't be all bad, right? This, was around the time that my good old friend Jazz was just about to launch his new vodka brand, and he'd made me a nice proposal to become involved with the business, which in itself would have been a pleasure. But if I needed to work around music, vodka and hot countries to put some deals together, then who was I to decline? I'd see what the lads in Magaluf had going on and suss out if there were any deals to be done with Jazz's new line while I was there. We landed in Magaluf, and there was already a car waiting outside to take us to our accommodation, which, upon arrival too, I gave a thorough security inspection before cases were unpacked, and we got comfortable. We met up with Kian, his missus, Alan and their pals for a meal, after which things went from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye, and as experienced many times before, we soon found ourselves slightly intoxicated in a club. The whole of the week there would follow a similar pattern. As the saying goes, eat, sleep, rave, repeat. I was so well looked after out there, to the point where I couldn't get a round in. Even if I tried, they just wouldn't let me. Granted, my original suspicions about Magaluf, being like a poor man's Ibiza with absolutely no class to it at all, were all entirely confirmed, but I was in really good company and experiencing something that I never would have if I hadn't come to know these people in Ibiza. I can be around the richest or the poorest, the best or the worst that society has to offer. So long as no one is fucking with me, I'm pretty comfortable in most situations. So it was a simple case of party on and get stuck in. We spent most of our nights in a venue aptly named Alex's Bar, where the owner knew Kian and the lads well and recognised me. He proper looked after us, each and every time we walked through the door, and realising that perhaps we were best kept away from certain punters, we had our own section which never ran dry. One night, we were at a bar on the main strip and there was a bit of a commotion not far from us, and something which must have come from my days of doing the door, I took a casual interest in what the fuss was about when one of our group came beside me to explain. There was a midget stripper unhandcuffing himself from a young lady as other females were swarming around him. Then as a gap appeared in the crowd, I realised he was showing them all of his manhood, which was almost as big as the rest of him. Talk about a third arm. The guys in our group excitedly explained that this fella's drinks and kebabs are paid for through the whole season, entirely by drunken women, and that he shags more girls than most fellas could possibly dream of on their holiday. I leant back on the bar, took a look around me, and felt like I was in a Twilight Zone episode. Every hen party and stag do that had ever graced Southend's club scene, personified. It was then that I questioned myself further and what the fuck I was doing, as here I am at 56 years of age, pissed up on the main strip in Magaluf. Just taking into account of what was going on around me, and the people who were in their 20s and 30s, all without a care in the world or any inhibitions, and what must have been freshly divorced men in the 40s and 50s trying to relive their youths. Later on in that particular evening I went into the toilets, and something instantly seemed off to me. There was no fucker to be seen. Before I even considered doing what I'd came to do, I paused instinctively to think. Perhaps I was in the wrong toilets, or I was being set up. I heard strange animalistic noises coming from one of the cubicles. Now feeling a bit paranoid and noticing that the door wasn't completely shut or even locked, I pushed it open with my foot, half expecting to find a man dying of an asthma attack or had done too much gear and his world and mental state was crashing down around him. But what I found was far worse. The midget with the enormous cock was just finishing up from smashing some slag in against the wall. "Ah, sorry about that," I joked as I hurriedly headed towards the nearest urinal, once again thinking, where the fuck did I bring us? Late into our night we were at Alex's Bar. The group we were with really were a right fucking laugh, and even Alex had left his post to join us several times through the night. As is often the case, due to an argument made 1,000 times worse by some drunken and, let's say, overly outspoken females, a fight broke out on the dance floor, which then quickly became a mass brawl. People were grabbing their belongings, guys were grabbing their girls and all heading for the door, rapido. I carried on drinking my goose and casually observing until the brawl spread from the dance floor over to near us, so I straightened up and readied myself, just in case. Bouncers were running in trying to put a stop to the fighting, which seemed to be effectively fanning the flames. Also pouring petrol on were the gobshite girls, who Gemma cleverly managed to talk into stepping into the ladies' room for a moment. Then she wedged the door shut to keep them at bay for a while. Genius, I thought. There was a clear winning side emerging in the events that were unfolding before my slightly drunken eyes. A crew of African guys, absolutely massive lumps, were knocking down most of who came their way. Somehow a couple of the lads in our group became entangled in this tear-up, I guess because they live and work there throughout the season and know a lot of people, especially the venue owners and security. But as hard as I'd tried to stay out of this mess, I too was drawn in when I saw one of our group about to be knocked into next week. The biggest guy of the African crew ran at this lad and was about to seriously fuck up his face, but as he came closer to me I chinned him with a quick left and went to continue hitting him, being as he was about twice my size, young and athletically built. I figured I'd better try to end this one fast, or I'd be laid out with the other bodies on the floor snoring. Anyway, as luck would have it, and to my disbelief, he went straight down. "Fuck me, thanks Carlton, I thought he was going to kill me," came a cheery voice over the sound of the music. The biggest of the troublemakers was out of the game for the moment at least. But then I realised I now had his mates stood before me in a half circle, deciding in their minds what their next move should be. This time I was surely fucked, and backing down isn't an option, so there was only one thing for it. "Come on then, you fucking cunts, let's go." With that, and to my astonishment, they backed down, and thank fuck they did because they would have weighed me right in. With that, we went outside to get some air and take stock, just as the mobile security patrol ran in through the doors to help finish the saga that had now emptied out the entire venue. I started noticing people talking, taking photos and videos all around. A few distant mentions of my name in lowered tones were enough for me to call it a night, because as Kian was now saying, the Guardia Civil wouldn't be far away now. Alex knew what could unfold, and he ushered me and Gemma round the side and into a taxi, and we were gone. On a more positive note, however, I was really surprised how many of the old East End and West Ham lot are living and holidaying on that island. I ran into scores of them throughout the trip, which was lovely. I was also greeted by several people who remembered me from the rave and club scenes, and even got asked along with a top group from Middlesbrough to watch a World Cup game that was being aired at a rooftop VIP bar. Being as it was only round the corner, and in the spirit of checking out new places, we went along. By the end of the day, we were invited to their wedding, which was later in the week. They were a real good bunch, and we had a great time that afternoon. I'd had a tip on a good tattooist in the town, and I'd been wanting to get some cover-up work done for a while, so partly to get the ink done, and partly to get away from this bunch of insane party animals for a few hours, I booked the work in. Gemma had a bit of work done by another artist in the shop at the same time, so we were both laying on opposite beds, looking and feeling half dead, discussing how Kian, Alan and the rest of them really needed to slow down a bit. I remember approaching the 3.5-hour mark and the tattoo machine, artists hate it when you call it a tattoo gun, started to feel like a hammer and chisel against my rib cage. Hungry, hanging and feeling aggravated, I decided to get the last half hour done when I was back in England, as I just couldn't put up with it anymore, so I paid the man and fucked off out of there sharpish. Believe it or not, in amongst all the madness, I had managed to get several venues, including a 5E hotel, on the hook for Jazz's vodka. I'd exchanged cards with several big business owners who were interested in making the switch to the new product, and I'd even pulled Jazz himself in on a meeting via a video link. Sadly, as you know by this point in my book, the deals would never come to apparition as Jazz passed away later that year. I should explain that I purposefully went just days before the official summer opening parties, and having initially booked 7 nights, believing that would be enough to take a look around, party, and explore possible business opportunities. We'd extended our stay by a further 5 nights already, and having partied that away, the guys were on at us to stay for just one more week to just do a few opening parties. But it was high time I started going to bed at 10 p.m. again, as opposed to 10 a.m. During the plane journey home from Magaluf, even though I was a bit worse for wear, I did a bit of thinking and it hit me. The stark difference between how the Magaluf lads had treated me compared to how one dog in particular had, and "This club is yours as much as it is mine, Carlton. You know that my brother, being virtually forgotten about for 3 days and handed a table bill before the sun had even gone down. I guess some people have short memories when it comes to the help they'd received getting to where they are, not to mention all the times they've had their arses saved, thanks to the name of another. The world has more than its fair share of people who have given their unquestionable loyalty and promises of shared wealth once they'd got paid. It was 12 days of my life that I had been robbed of and would not get back, but nevertheless, it was another one of my spur-of-the-moment moves that hadn't turned out too bad. I'd made contacts for the vodka, had some interesting experiences, great laughs, and the hospitality shown to me by Kian and Alan had been second to none.